guest, Mr. Kalyan Chakrabarti, the managing director and co-founder of Rising Straits Capital, based in New Delhi, India, joining us today. Kalyan is a member of the Executive Council of Rising Straits Capital with more than 15 years of experience in real estate investment management as well as financial services. He holds an MBA in finance and strategy as well as degrees in law and mechanical engineering from Delhi University. Today he joins us to give us an inside look into the current situation happening in India with the currency crisis as well as the overall economy. So Kalyan, welcome to Rethinking the Dollar.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike.
Well, I appreciate you taking time. I know you were some big time difference there. It's late evening there, so I appreciate you taking time out your day to sit down with me. And so looking forward to getting a different perspective on what's happening in your country now, because in the Western world, the story we kind of, receive here is more so watered down, tainted, or, just not the full truth. So here with the Rethinking the Dollar, my goal is to get a different side of the story. And so definitely looking forward to getting your take. And before we actually get into the situation happening in India, the show is entitled Rethinking the Dollar. And so I imagine a lot of people are rethinking the rupee a lot these days. So if you could, what comes to mind when you hear the words rethinking the dollar or in your case, rethinking the rupee?
For us, the rupee has been behaving a little weirdly for the last, I would say, about a decade or so. Without getting into too much of statistics, we have had issues around basic ways in which we did our national accounting, for example. So we are a $2 trillion economy, but we are not sure whether we are 2 trillion or 2.5 trillion, or probably some people say 3 trillion, because there is almost anywhere between 25% to 65%, depending on whom you speak to and which day you speak to, which happens to be economy or economic transactions which don't get accounted under the national accounting standards. As a result, you now are talking about $2 trillion of formal economy and anywhere between $500 billion to $1.3 trillion of informal economy. So you are talking about an economy between 2.5 to 3.3. Now, if you are a household, you will never accept a situation where you do not know what your income levels are. If you are a corporate, you will never accept a P&L where you do not know what your revenues are. How is it acceptable for us as a country to have a number which is not known? So it's very important for us to fix this situation. So rethinking the rupee in that context for me is extremely important. We as a country need to know where we stand. We as a country need to make sure that every rupee which goes through the economy in the form of an economic transaction gets taxed appropriately, and that money gets used for whatever is the intended use. In the absence of that, we are probably not encouraging the right behavior amongst the citizens in terms of, let's say, talent or supremacy of ideas and quality. Things like that need to succeed in the economy. But the moment you have a set of transactions which escape the mainstream of the economy, you are encouraging certain things which are not exactly desirable, quote unquote.
Right.
We call it the black economy or the black market or parallel economy, whatever is a good word to talk about.
Right.
But rethinking rupee to me at this point in time means having one single rupee which gets used for both the white side of the economy and the black side of the economy, or the parallel economy and the mainstream economy. So we have one single economy and one single rupee traversing across both those worlds.
Right. Okay. So with that being the case there, it sounds like that we're going to definitely get into the whole idea of a black economy, which is the parallel economy or the underground economy you're probably referring to. Now, over here in the Western world, we're predominantly the dollar, the Federal Reserve note is our national currency. So it circulates in the black economy, I would say, as well as the mainstream economy as well. Now, as far as learning about monetary policy, I'm assuming a lot of your native citizens there are now beginning to really awaken to the idea of there being two separate economies that is being addressed right now. And so with that being the case, they're probably experiencing some hardships possibly in having to exchange rupees last minute type of thing. So what can Westerners take away from, the situation you guys are going through right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is an element of hardship that nearly everyone is going through, no denying that. But in order to kind of leave a better tomorrow, hopefully for our future generations, it's something that most of us are willing to take. There is, of course, the grumbling in certain areas because the transition has not been as smooth, and there are always elements in the society who have continued to not follow the rule of law as they were doing in the past. One hopes, of course, that they are brought to book sooner than later and are made to pay for their misdeeds. But in the interim, the country is supporting patiently. There would have been riots on the streets if the intent were wrong or the execution were terribly wrong. Yes, there are issues with it, but don't forget, in the context of the fact that this is a massive, massive change, we are talking about replacing 86% of our currency in circulation. That's a lot of money.
Right.
And we are replacing all of that in a matter of like about 50 days.
Right.
That's very little time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we are talking about an economy which is primarily cash run.
Right.
Most of our transactions in the rural parts of India are run in cash. Many of the transactions, even in urban India, are run in cash. So if you contextualize all of this, it's a lot of change happening in a very short time. On top of it, there were a couple of other dimensions probably one needs to look at. The whole exercise was done, or the planning was done in quite a secretive manner, so that people don't get to get a wind of it till the last minute. As a result, a lot of preparation and planning could not have gone into it. So most of this planning and execution is happening post the announcement. That is one additional challenge.
Right.
The other challenge is we don't have any big international precedent or parallel to follow. So there is not any big case study to learn from as to how to get these things right. So we are doing our own experiment, and hopefully the world will benefit other countries as they roll out their own little experiments later on in subsequent decades or years. Hopefully they will learn from us. But
Right.
this is as big an experiment as it could get in order to fix the basic core of our economy.
Right.
So we are patient. I think largely people have been patient, demonstrated by the popularity ratings our Prime Minister enjoys here as well.
Right. Now, let's get into your article that you sent me. And also, I'll more likely attach a link to it. I'll post it on my website and post it down below so the viewers can have a chance to read it directly because it's, 5 pages of detailed information. Now, you kind of start
Sure.
off, and it's entitled Demonetization, the Modi Way, meaning, your Prime Minister, Narendra Modi there. And so you start off giving a little bit of historical context into the whole rupee idea on the subject of demonetization. So let's get into that a little bit, demonetization and India's background with the rupee when it came to, legal tender and things like that.
Sure. So India has had attempts in the past, starting from 1946, when there was an attempt to do a demonetization. Subsequently, we did a demonetization in 1978. There were attempts, or rather suggestions, to do demonetization starting from 1971 onwards. The bullet was, however, never beaten properly. The amount of currency which was getting touched was barely in single digit in percentage terms. So it was not exactly going to fix anything in the economy to make sure that the entire economy is rebooted. More critically, attaching a big cost to people who operate in the parallel economy.
Yeah.
That was never done in the past. As a result, whatever little half-hearted attempts happened in India in the past, firstly, they happened very few. One in 46, one in 78. Secondly, they were too small. So history is not a big teacher for us as far as this is concerned.
Yeah.
So this is the real first serious attempt.
Right. So yeah, you mentioned earlier that it's an experiment. So I think it's unfortunate that the government rolls out experiments on the people in a trial and error basis, and basically the citizens themselves, usually the poorer class, tend to suffer the most. And I think it's unfair that the citizens have to be the guinea pigs most of the times in these experiments. But that's, I guess, how you have trial and error, I guess, huh?
I beg to differ on that. I
Yeah.
guess the government has not exactly unleashed this one as a off-the-cuff single effort. There has been a series and sequence of efforts that the government has launched from the day this government came into power. For somebody who probably sits in abroad, you would not be blamed for not necessarily tracking it. But it started with what we call as a setting up of a special investigation team under the Supreme Court, under a retired Supreme Court judge back in May 2014. The day this Prime Minister took over, the first action was in order the creation of a SIT or Special Investigation Team to tackle black money. That was the first. Subsequently, there were a lot of things. One of them is called, for example, the Benami Properties Act. So basically, people cannot be owning properties in fictitious names or on others' names. You own it by having proper KYC documentation, as an example. There was a big drive to do what is called as a IDS, income disclosure scheme, which closed as of September, I think, where people were called forward to disclose voluntarily, pay taxes, to convert, to basically disclose and come clean. There were opportunities given.
Right.
Since February of this year, there have been series of activities that the government has been doing in order to encourage digitization and make people go cashless. So it's not a sudden burst of inspiration which the Prime Minister came through and came up with it.
Right.
The reason I call it as an experiment is there is no parallel.
Yeah.
Once this is over, there will probably be a big and long Harvard case study which will be written as to how to do it and how lots of things can go right. I am just saying the enormity of the exercise makes it a significantly large economic experiment, and we will learn a lot about it.
Right.
So I'm not looking at experiment in a negative way. I'm talking about experiment in an extremely positive way.
Right. I understand
Yes.
that. And
Having said that,
yeah,
there are sections of the people who are definitely struggling. No denying that. Uh, there are certain pains that we as a nation are going through. There are certain cross sections of the people who are going through bigger pain. There are certain cross sections through smaller pain. But by and large, people do appreciate at this stage that the gain at the end of this cycle of pain is going to be substantially higher by several magnitudes, several multiples of what the pain is.
right.
And people are fine with it.
Right. So you listed three or four things, three or four levels of activity already taken that has already taken place by your government. That me myself, I've never heard that from mainstream news. So I was unaware of the fact that this is not something literally that just came out of the blue. You've mentioned that it's been a kind of a buildup of activity that led to this. So that right there in itself is education for me. So thanks for breaking it down a little further. Now I want to get into the economy side of things, like just the terminology black money and dark money and just the negative connotation behind unreported activity in the economy. And so being that I believe I've never been to India, but yet I believe the majority of the population there probably lives under the poverty line type of thing and don't have access to bank accounts and things like that, so everything is cash driven. So that type of lack of access to technology and things like that seems like it might promote illegal activity and black market type of things. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm glad you asked this question, because one of the big things which was done as soon as this government took over, starting August 2014, ending around January 2015, was to have a bank account for every Indian. We had, I do not have these numbers off the top of my head, but we had a penetration of close to about 60% households having bank accounts, or somewhere short of 60%. As of as of January of 2015, we had more than 90%. As of today, we have about 98 to 99% of the households having a bank account.
Right.
That's not a small number.
Right.
For a country which might have taken about 67 years to get a 60% coverage, to get a 98, 99% coverage over the next 2 years, was basically the government had this in the back of its mind, that it needed to improve fiscal inclusion, financial inclusion at the bottommost layer of the pyramid.
Right.
So people do have bank accounts. Each of those bank accounts do come with a debit card so that they can transact, they can withdraw. I guess the bigger problem is that of the density of the ability to do banking. So the bank branches may not be there in certain rural areas. So those are probably next priorities for the banks, for the government to focus on. But firstly, there are banks available. Having said that, banking as a behavior needs to be improved as well. People who are used to dealing with cash forever, have never looked at a bank account. Suddenly, even if you give them a bank account, you need to create reasons for them to go to a bank account.
Right.
So we have, for example, after a lot of time, the government started sending subsidies to people's bank account. So the poor people needed to get some subsidy on account of food or otherwise. And those are now going into their bank accounts instead of being disbursed through cash. And cash leads to leakages and corruption. Bank account essentially means you get the money directly into your account on a given specified day. So you have better subsidy management. But more importantly, what it made people feel is they're now getting cash in their account which they can use as per their own discretion and choice as to what they buy.
Right.
That makes a difference.
Right.
So
Right.
we call it DBT or direct benefit transfer, but that's a huge reform. So there are a few things which have happened which makes the lower section or the bottom of the pyramid people also to have some banking abilities. Yes, we will take time to make them to use it more regularly, to become more confident users of the banking system. But do we have the basic backbone and do we have the basic coverage? Yes, we do.
Right. Now that's
Probably better than most economies of our level of evolution. We are
right.
a developing economy. To that extent, for a country at our stage and age and growth, uh, we are probably pretty good.
Right. Fair enough.
Now, with respect to, you also raised another point, majority of the people being below the poverty line. That's not true. We have probably about 30% people who are below the poverty line, but the poverty line benchmark keeps getting revised so that the benchmark keeps getting raised,
Right.
so that you you keep tougher standards for yourself, so that you kind of pull more people uh, out of the poverty levels.
Right.
But yes, we have a lot of work to do on that.
Right.
And this particular initiative, for that matter, adds to the might of the government to be able to solve that. The
Right.
moment you stop leakage and the moment you are able to raise more resources through taxes, you are
Right.
able to solve your societal problems and try to fix your various indicators.
Right. Now, right
Which,
now, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish up your statement. Go ahead.
yeah, please carry on.
Okay. Well, earlier you mentioned that, and also you wrote in your article that 80%, 86% of cash was removed from circulation, and so that's the 500 and the 1,000 rupee note, and they instilled a 2,000 rupee note, and so from what I've seen news wise, there's been like a shortage of the ability to make change for that 2,000 note, and so is that really the case, or how are they making adjustments with just interactions as of right now as things continue to develop overall?
No, no, absolutely. It is an issue. I guess one cannot deny that.
Hmm.
Primarily, if you look at a ladder of various denominations of currencies, then we have at the bottommost, we have got a 10 rupees, a 20 rupees, a 50 rupees, a 100 rupees. Earlier, we had a 500 rupees and a 1,000 rupees. So the ladder of currencies was pretty nicely organized. So if I were transacting at a particular number, the number of currency notes that I need to give for transacting something was, let's say, earlier, let's assume I'm doing a transaction worth 1900 rupees. So I give a 1,000 rupees, a 500 rupees, and four 100 rupees. I give basically five notes. I'm done. Now, how do I get there? The only way I get there now is almost with 1900 rupee notes, because the 500 rupee notes has not exactly come in enough amount of circulation. So obviously, you not only need more currency notes to be able to transact, but there is more demand for those notes because there is lesser number of notes available in the economy. So it's a transient issue that we are going through. The 500 notes have been put into production in a large way. So we do expect, as the government is saying, that it will be hitting the market very soon. Over the next 30 days or so, there will be a huge amount of supply of 500s in the market. That will reduce the ladder issue, or rather solve the ladder issue that I talked about a little bit, and hence should start helping matters.
So will it be
And
a
obviously, one of the other ways it gets solved is when you start transacting digitally, then you don't have any problem of currency notes at all.
right?
And with the government trying to encourage that, to me, that fixes the problem slightly. So a combination of 500 rupees coming into the market and more cashless and digital ways of transacting should help us get there.
Right. So the new 500 that will be issued, it will be of a totally different make and model that will be a little less counterfeit deterrent type of thing, or so will they reintroduce the 500 and 1,000 in newer models or something like that eventually, or
So the 500 is already been introduced. So the problem is that of the supply. Yes, the 500 looks completely different. The 2000 looks completely different. If I go by what the government says, these are indigenously designed but extremely high on security features, and hence will be more difficult to counterfeit.
right, right,
Uh, and obviously, the technology or the designs have changed. The earlier notes were probably 10-year-old in terms of design or 15-year-old in design. Obviously, there are better designs, better printing technologies. I am suspecting the government would have leveraged or taken advantage of the advancements in those things and would have gotten better technologies. The notes definitely feel more difficult to counterfeit.
Right.
but I'm not an expert. So
Right.
I cannot really tell you whether it is difficult or not. I hope as an Indian that it is more difficult to counterfeit, because I know the problems which come with counterfeiting are really bad.
Right, right. And so let me ask you a question. So now, last couple of weeks or so, since everything's kind of unfolded, the 500, 1,000 have been is no longer considered legal tender, but yeah, I'm sure your economy is flooded with them, counterfeit and authentic. And so, are they completely removed, or are they still? Are some people still probably willing to transact with them just because they're familiar with them in the meantime, or are people literally trying to get rid of them as best they can, type of thing?
No, so there were certain specific transactions which were allowed by the government for certain duration. So, for example, the government did allow initially railway tickets to be bought using that currency, the old currency. It allowed medicinal supplies to be bought using that currency. So you could go to a hospital and, for example, pay for it. Similarly, the government did allow you to buy seeds and fertilizers from government-owned seeds and fertilizer stores. The government did allow you to buy petrol or gas, gas. We call it petrol and diesel, using that currency. But each of those were phased out gradually.
Mhm.
So as of today, it is not allowed for anything other than going into a bank and depositing into the bank, into a particular account which is KYC compliant,
Right, right. Now, in your
so that they
article,
can trace as to who deposited what, how much of old currency.
right, right, understandable there. So I mean, it makes it a little bit more orderly. It sounds like. Now, towards the middle of your
Yes.
article, you mentioned like kind of like six motivations for how things kind of transpired in your country, and one was to render the black market useless, and then the other one was increase the tax base. The third one was fixing the government. Now, how big? Your fourth point was the fake currency. How of an issue was that? Was counterfeiting a really really big problem there? Did that kind of played into the need to do this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two problems here. It is not about how large is it as a percentage of the currency in circulation. It is about, because that is difficult to really talk about, because one doesn't really know. There is not a particular regulatory agency which only takes care of fake currencies.
Right.
They get detected as and when the fake currency comes into the banking system, or somebody tries to pass it off. That's when they get detected. So various measures kind of various people kind of speculate as to what that number is. Somebody says it probably is about $2 billion. Somebody says it's probably $20 billion on an annual basis. So it is very difficult to know what is the right number. But it doesn't matter what the right number is. The problem is it is a large number, irrespective, and it is large enough to cause large scale disruption of the wrong kind.
Right.
Because fake currency, what it does, if I'm a poor guy, my wealth is, let's say, I earn 500 rupees a day, let's assume for a second, and the guy who pays me gives me a fake currency. When I go with this fake currency for some purchase, it gets detected, and in a microsecond, I lost my day's earning already.
Right.
So it's unfair to the people, because for genuine effort, you might not be getting compensated,
Right.
and you realize post facto you can do nothing about it. That is a smaller impact. The bigger impact is we have had issues of counterfeit currencies getting used by terrorist organizations for creating problems, targeting India in many ways. The
Right.
internal security issues or external security issues, and this is a very strong deterrent. So, for both the reasons, it is important to attack fake currency in a big way.
Right. Now, towards the end of your article, as we draw down towards the end of our conversation, you kind of hinted at some more initiatives being put in place that are kind of in a positive way, getting things kind of under order. And the acronym was JAM. Can you
Yes,
explain what that is and go into a little bit of detail as to what that actually is?
surely. So the government basically, like I said, has played to a particular strategy, and these are various chess moves which seem to be coming one after other. For most people, they probably struggle to see that. When you see holistically, the first thing that the government want to do is a Jan Dhan Yojana. It's a Hindi word, but what it means is every unbanked person in the economy needs to be banked. Every person needs to be part of the banking system. Like I explained earlier, essentially increase the penetration of the banking system in such a manner that every household and preferably every individual has an account. We have more or less reached there. We now are like into our 99th% of holding. We probably will be 100. And it will probably be a difficult proposition to get 100 anyways. You will always have some people who will come of age and need to be part of the banking system, but we are as good as it gets, nearly there. The second thing that we did not have one single database, just like you have a social security system in the US, where you have a social security number assigned to each and every individual, against which you can basically uh, manage and monitor probably almost every individual. We don't have any such system so far in the country. So for the first time, this was introduced almost 5-6 years ago. This has been broad based and taken into a different scale altogether. And the way it works is your biometric data is captured alongside all your information centrally by the government in a safe manner. And this can now be linked so that each and every citizen is linked as part of a system. And whenever I'm trying to, for example, connect my information to the way I transact with the bank or to the way I transact with other services which are provided by the state, I use this particular unique number. That is called Aadhaar. That is called Aadhaar. So it is difficult to duplicate because the biometric information is pretty unique. And so, for example, my fingerprint is pretty unique for myself. So that's how it kind of works. So that is Aadhaar. So every person needs to have a bank account. Every person needs to have an Aadhaar account. And then if between Aadhaar and Jan Dhan account, you can transact and access almost any service that is on offer by the government, whether to get uh, almost anything. Let's say a marriage certificate you want to obtain tomorrow, or a driver license you want to obtain tomorrow. Anything which involves a citizen to government interface can then be digitized using the mobile telephony.
Interesting. So, and also,
so the three of those things need to kind of come together, or the government wanted to bring that together to provide better, faster, and less expensive governance and more reliable governance.
Right. Interesting. Now,
all of this is coming together in a way.
Right. Right. And so the way you describe it and the insight you give me from being actually there and being amongst it is different than what I've received here. So it's been very valuable to help me understand it. Now, as we draw towards the end, the whole program here is rethinking the dollar. And so some of the things you mentioned are kind of issues that we face here in America with the debasement of our currency, the counterfeiting aspect, because a lot of our monetary policy here is not necessarily for the people, as I might want to say. And so those are a lot of concerns that you're experiencing there are what we're experiencing here as well, but not on that grand scale of having our, cash, kind of, taken away from us just yet. But I know that you guys there in India are big components of gold. And so a lot of, ritual / investment type of things happen with gold there. Now, being that the cash has been removed and things are being done differently, is there a higher demand from what you see for precious metals and gold for savings and investing and things like that, from what you are aware of?
Yes, I think it is too early to say as to what will be the impact. My personal sense is the demand for gold will come down.
Will come down.
Because there has been a law around how much of gold can you have as an individual uh, in your possession. And you are not supposed to exceed. If you exceed that, you can be punished for that. You can be taxed for that, rather.
Really?
But people have been violating it with impunity in the past, and if the government starts enforcing it, then there can be trouble. So I personally think there will be a decline in gold demand. But I think, just to go back to history a little bit, or the way the culture works, yes, there is the rituals and there is this liking for gold that most of us Indians have, but there is also a social security aspect. Where do you put your money? We are evolving as an economy, so our financial sector is growing, which essentially means we will start seeing more and more investments going into alternative assets, as an example, or mutual funds for that matter. With banking growing, we will start seeing more deposits going into the bank, and fixed deposits and savings accounts and things like that, which give you an element of security of your savings and some amount of return on that. Those were missing for quite a few people who were holding it in the form of cash. Right. So the easiest thing in a liquid manner, if they were to invest in something, it was gold, because historically people knew that it was anti-inflation, and people, were putting all their savings in that form.
Right.
But now with means developing, as people are getting wealthier, as people get more knowledgeable about the banking and financial services, I would hope there will be, and there are better products available in the financial side and more competition coming there. We would obviously see a shift away from gold towards smarter financial products.
Right.
It
Interesting.
could be a slow process, but it will definitely happen.
Right. Well, Kalyan,
It's a speculative answer, unfortunately, because I guess one doesn't exactly know. One has to see data.
right.
Last 4 or 5 years, government also introduced measures to discourage gold purchase. So they introduced tariff barriers in order to ensure that importation of gold becomes more expensive,
Mm,
just to discourage gold purchases.
right. Right. Interesting. That is very interesting there. So, what's been historically a safe haven is kind of being discouraged from, people actually continue to pursue that, even though they probably will anyway as they transition to the digital age. But yeah, it's an interesting perspective. Kalyan, I appreciate you sitting down with us and giving us a take on what's going on in your world in India today. I thank you for, taking the time out for us here at Rethinking the Dollar. Any last words? Any thoughts you might want to share with the Western world that really help us better understand the transition you guys are facing there?
Yes, so I guess it's both for Western world as well as my world. There are people who unfortunately are too curious to know how this will all end and are willing to or jumping into conclusions and declaring victory or defeat too soon. Uh, it's a process which will probably unfold over the next 60 to 90 days. Most Indians are pretty positive, including myself, that this will all turn out to be nice. There is a transient set of problems that we are going through with respect to some amount of business slowdown in certain sectors of the economy, some amount of trouble which some of us are facing with respect to liquidity not being available. But we are there for the long haul. We see we see this as our intergenerational responsibility of trying to do the right thing for the coming generations, and we feel pretty positive about the future. I would suggest the Western world to have the patience to see through as to what comes out at the end of it. It's a matter of 60 days. Indulging in speculation benefits no one.
Right, right. Well, fair enough. Well, thank you for sitting down. I want you to enjoy the rest of your day, and definitely I'll keep in contact with you and keep my ear to the ground and kind of follow along things going on there, and definitely look forward to hopefully speaking to you again.
Absolutely, Mike. Such a pleasure talking to you, and happy to be of help, and look forward to talking to you again.
Definitely, definitely. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.